Contributor Sarah Palin. Governor, great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much, David.
So I asked Governor Christie a couple of weeks ago, I said, of all the Republican candidates, can you think of anyone there who really inspires you? He said no. Can you?
Heck yeah. I'm so thankful for all these common sense conservative politicians willing to serve and cut for the right reasons. And with all due respect to Governor Christie, you know, he has no choice but to cut budgets because he's broke. His state is broke. What courage really is in the face of having a surplus when you have opportunity to spend other people's money. And then you still choose to rein in government, to let the private sector soar. That's real courage. And by the way, that's what I did as governor here when I engaged in hiring freezes and reduced earmarks by 86% and vetoed the largest amounts in our state's history despite having a surplus. That's real leadership and that's courage. But I do appreciate that Governor Christie is willing to face the reality in his state, and that is that they're going bankrupt. So he has to cut. He has no choice.
But you look at this group of candidates, the Republican candidates, and you really find inspirational leaders, the kind of inspirational leader that Governor Christie looks to be turning into.
I find inspiration in Tea Party patriots, those with common sense, who are independent and not playing a lot of games. They just want to get in there and do what's right and serve for the right reasons. And I really appreciate that those who have embraced the Tea Party movement and are serving in office today on local levels and state levels, there are just supporters of those candidates who are Tea Party patriots. I appreciate that they're so clear and articulate in what it is that they believe we need to do to get our economy back on the right track.
All right, let's talk about what's happening in the local sphere. Everybody always asks you questions about the national policies. I do want to probe your mind about the local politics, because some of them do spin off into federal issues, like collective bargaining, for example. We know, by the way, the federal government doesn't allow collective bargaining. Federal employees are banned to do collective bargaining. The president doesn't seem to be much interested in changing that. But there's a lot of focus on whether states should be allowed to change collective bargaining. Do you think they should? Do you think collective bargaining should be illegal for public sector unions in the states?
I like what Wisconsin is talking about right now, and that's allowing some collective bargaining for base wages of public employees. I don't have a problem with that. But overall, generally speaking, collective bargaining doesn't work in the public sector for state employees, because you have to ask, who is that public employee being loyal to when they are hired as a public servant? Are they loyal to their employer, the public, or is it to their union? I have seen over and over again, especially as governor, as we had allowed the reform of our pension plan for public employees. You know, I saw what the unions can do to those elected officials who want to stand strong, and you know, the unions protest and they don't want to believe truth and facts, and it leads one to believe that they have a hard time, these employees, understanding who their loyalty should be to. It should be to the taxpayer. And you know, I say it with all due respect to the union members. I place blame on the union leaders, these bosses who are not looking out for the employees and their best interest, because at the end of the day, like they're in Wisconsin, if they keep pushing and protesting a fair and a balanced ask of their governor, then that governor is going to have to lay off employees in order to afford what it is that will be given to the remaining employees.
Well, and it seems that's what's happening, Governor Walker. Now, does this spill over into your feelings about private sector unions as well?
Private sector unions, especially back in the day, certainly there was a need for, but there is a big difference between public sector unions and private sector unions. And, you know, they're in Wisconsin.
Yeah, because the management of the public sector unions are taxpayers. So there's a fundamental difference. Right. But when you look at what private sector, you look at some of these right-to-work laws that would disallow unions from forcing workers to join the union. Do you think that right-to-work rule is a good one?
I think it's un-American to not allow employees in the private sector to be able to choose whether they want part of their paycheck confiscated in the form of dues given to union bosses, so that those union bosses in too many areas can engage in political campaigns and endorsements that employee doesn't support or want to participate in. That's un-American. And to not allow for a secret ballot as to whether you want to join a union or not, that's un-American.
Now, how should the president weigh in on all this? We saw him kind of testing the waters. He was on kind of thin ice, like the thin ice we see out there in Alaska behind you. He was on thin ice when he was going into talking about what was happening in Wisconsin, immediately criticized for doing so. Is there any role for the president to be talking about all these issues, whether it's the states dealing with public sector unions or private sector unions?
Well, see, because our president is so inexperienced in the private sector and in government and in actually running anything or making any kind of budget, that inexperience is really made manifest in some of the statements he makes. Like trying to chime into what was going on there in Wisconsin, not understanding that his own employees, federal employees, they're not allowed to collect a bargain, and yet he was suggesting anyway that the governor of a state needed to allow his employees to be able to collect a bargain, and that's just you know, a facet of that inexperience. But what the president can do is help get our economy back on the right track,
right,
and not allow unfunded mandates heading into these states so that these states can avoid these economic woes that they're facing. And of course, the president can do that by engaging in just free market principles that work, time-tested truths like cutting taxes, incentivizing businesses, tapping into our own domestic sources of energy, because his naive and destructive and terrifying anti-oil agenda is going to bring our nation to our knees, and his agenda must be stopped.
Okay,
and if it
but
isn't,
let me put it to you,
we lose our exceptionalism.
If Governor Palin was, through some means, able to become a President Palin, would she have gotten involved at all in the situation in Wisconsin, or would you just sat back and let them handle their own affairs?
Because I'm a Federalist, because I'm a proponent and supporter of the 10th Amendment, I believe that states need autonomy, they need their own authority, they need to be respected to make their decisions themselves. And that's another thing that obviously our president didn't understand. So often it does seem that he kind of interjects himself into matters that then he has to back up, and you know, a lot of us can learn from what the president is doing wrong and know that if ever given the opportunity, we wouldn't repeat those mistakes. But if the president can understand that 10th Amendment and understand that states constitutionally have a lot more rights than he wants to grant them, then I think that he would never have tried to intervene in a state's union issues, intervening in what a governor was trying to do to allow his state, Wisconsin, to be solvent.
All right, we have to run, and you know how producers are. They're telling me to wrap 10 minutes ago. But when are we going to find out if you're running for president?
You know, I still think it's months away before people need to be lining up and making announcements as to what to do. So in the meantime, you know, I'm going to keep chiming in on the issues that are important in this day, because there is so much turmoil, there is so much going on, and there are so many solutions that need to be plugged in to get our economy back on the right track. I'm going to participate on that level.
Former governor of the great state of Alaska, Sarah Palin, great to see you again. My best to your family.
Thank you. Thanks so much.